streaming. And so if I could ask you all to keep fairly quiet now, please, because we shall be going live in about 1 minute's time. Well, good evening, members, ladies and gentlemen present here in the committee room, and also everyone who happens to be watching this planning committee meeting here at Lichfield District Council online. Today is the 31st of July, 2023. In front of me, I have the agenda, and item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence. So members, could you please let me know if you know of anyone who has given their apologies. I've had apologies sent from Councillor Sonia Wilcox, and I think that is all, because that would make up 14 on the planning committee. So I take it that there is just one apology, and that is Councillor Sonia Wilcox. Thank you. Members, it's customary at this stage. Item 2 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Can I please have a show of hands, anyone who wishes to declare an interest, please? Councillor Salter.
Yes, thank you, good evening, Chair, members. I need to declare an interest on application number 22/1533/FUH. I will be speaking on the matter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Salter, and also Councillor Councillor Hughes.
I have an interest as ward councillor for the, I'm not sure what number it is, the demolition of the car park, and I've also discussed that as a Lichfield City Councillor, so I don't regard myself as predetermined. That's fine, Councillor Hughes, thank you. Yes, that one is 23/00649/FUL. Thank you. And I believe Councillor Ashton as well, you have.
Yes,
a declaration.
I'm likewise a ward councillor for Stowe Ward, which includes the Birmingham Road site.
Thank you very much indeed. And that brings me on to me, because I have a declaration of interest as well. The application on the list for Orgreave Farm, which is 23/00519/FUL. I'm having to declare an interest there because the company for which I work does have a business relationship with the applicant, and I therefore have a prejudicial interest. For that reason, I cannot participate in any way, and as a result of that, I must hand over to my Vice Chairman, Councillor Checkland, for the duration of that application. So I shall have to leave the committee room when that one is being discussed. Thank you. Right, so we now move on to the minutes of the meeting to which I alluded a few minutes ago, saying I couldn't believe how quickly 4 weeks had passed. Held on the 3rd of July, those minutes have been circulated electronically to you members. Are you happy that I sign those as a true and correct record? Councillor Checkland, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just in the minutes, the declarations of interest, everyone's declared that they're a councillor for item 4, and I'm sure they were all on different wards, so I think they're not all on ward item 4.
Thank you, Councillor Checkland. We shall amend that then. Thank you very much. Yes, indeed, Councillor Vernon.
Apologies for absence on the 3rd of July. I have given my apologies because I was away on holiday, and that's not being declared. I would not like anybody to think I haven't bothered to turn up.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. I do recall that you had sent your apologies actually, so if that can be amended as well, please. So members, subject to those 2 amendments, are you happy that I sign the minutes as a true and correct record, please?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'll sign those later. Thank you. Members, we now move on to item 4 on this agenda here today. And the first of these is the planning application, which goes by the number 23/00216/COU. That's change of use. And to take us through this, Kerry, isn't it? Yes, I'm going to be handing over in just a moment to the Principal Planning Officer, and that is Kerry Challoner. So Kerry, thank you very much indeed. If you'd like to introduce this application to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, committee members. The first application on the agenda tonight relates to Rosewood House, which is at 19 Rosemary Hill Road. The application was called in by Councillor Powell, who has referred to objections received from neighbouring occupiers and particular concerns about HMO being developed. The site is within Little Aston Conservation Area, comprises of nice large properties in quite large blocks. And that's the site outlined in red there. It fronts onto Rosemary Hill Road. If I can get my clicker to work. No. So yeah, the front of the site there is to the eastern side. You can just see the road. The property is a detached 4-bed property and also has a 1-bedroom annex that's attached to it. There's no recent planning history for the application property. And what's proposed tonight is a change of use from C3, which is a residential family dwelling house effectively, to a C2 residential use for the care of 3 children under the age of 18. No external changes to the property are proposed, and the access, parking, etc. will all be as existing. This plan just shows the existing floor plan. There are some internal minor changes proposed, mainly to the sort of bedroom areas, and we have received 8 letters of objection. During the course of the application, extra information has been submitted. I would point members in the direction of the supplementary that was released this afternoon, which in the interest of certainty, a description update has been agreed with the applicants to ensure that the change of use for C2 actually does specifically refer to the care of 3 children under the age of 18. We've also added an additional 2 conditions to belt and brace that. And we've done that because the use class C2 can be anything in hospital, nursing home, and care due to a disability. So that could be drug or alcohol dependency, mental disorders, a care home or a hospital. So to really restrict that and refine it down to what the applicant has submitted, we've updated the description of development and added them 2 conditions, which officers consider is sufficient to define the permission. So the recommendation is to approve, subject to conditions as set out in the report, and the extra 2 conditions that are set out in the supplementary paper this evening. And that concludes my presentation.
So thank you very much indeed there to Kerry Challoner for that report there. We do, before we have any questions, comments from members, of course, we do have speakers, or in fact, 1 speaker on this occasion. This is Mr. Paul Harris of CERTA Planning, and Mr. Harris is speaking on behalf of the objectors. If you'd like to make your way forward, please. Mr. Harris, thank you. I'm sure you'll be very familiar with the way that, yes, that these meetings are run. I know you've had experience of being at Lichfield District Council on many occasions previously. You have 5 minutes. If you're still speaking after 4.5 minutes, then the officer on my left will make you aware of the fact you only have 30 seconds left. If you're still speaking at the end of 5 minutes, you must cease immediately. The 5 minutes is up. Thank you very much. And your time starts as soon as you begin to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. My name is Paul Harris. I'm the Director of CERTA Planning, and I speak to you on behalf of a number of residents who live in close proximity to the application site and who raised serious concerns about these proposals. Now, much of what I wanted to say this evening is no longer necessary as a result of the additional conditions that have just been reported by the supplementary paper. But on the face of it, the provision of care for a small number of children, we're told it's 3, within an existing home environment is laudable. And indeed, at face value, I understand how your officers have arrived at the positive conclusion they have. In other words, it's just 3 children living in a relatively large house with at least 3 adults, essentially as a family. And that would not give rise to any amenity impacts above those that the conventional occupation of the home by a similar sized family would. The considerations, however, are just not that simple, and regrettably, the committee report before you doesn't grapple with the full range of material considerations which are in play. The first question the application begs is, why take the change of use at all? After all, the existing C3 or dwelling house use is capable of being used lawfully for the care of not more than 6 residents living as a single household. And if I'm not mistaken, that is what the applicant now states the use would amount to. But it stands to reason that the C2 or residential institution use sought is only necessary because the applicant wishes to provide something other than what they're already able to provide under the use class they already have. And this is an especially important point because their submission states that they only wish to care for a maximum of 3 children at any one time. The need for the change of use is therefore difficult to reconcile. Nevertheless, given the C2 use is materially different to the C3 use which they already have, it must follow that they wish, in fact, for future residents to be greater in number than 6 and or not actually live together as a single household. Otherwise, why apply for the change of use at all? In both these scenarios, it's reasonable to conclude that the amenity impacts must, by definition, be materially different to those associated with the average C3 use or conventional family home. Now, members will note that the committee report is silent on this matter and has simply reached a conclusion on amenity matters by reference to the maximum number of children in the home at any one time being comparable to the size use as a family residence. And respectfully, that is too simplistic an approach to take and is illustrated by the failure to recognise the concerns raised by the Council's Environmental Health Officer on this very matter. Members will note that the Environmental Health Officer sought further details as to the specific care needs of the proposed children, specifically in regards to how any complex behavioural needs will be managed to limit the impacts upon neighbouring amenity. And as far as I understand, no further detailed information has been provided in this respect. And there are, in any event, no further comments from the Council's Environmental Health Officer. Thus, this principal issue remains an unresolved one, and I fail to understand how a robust conclusion on this matter has been reached. Similarly, we note that there are a number of concerns raised by the Council's Housing Strategy Officer, which remain unresolved. And in addition, we remain concerned that with staff and any commercial waste requirements, there is actually insufficient space for parking and manoeuvring despite the County Council's comments. In summary, therefore, we have essentially an unresolved objection from the Council's Environmental Health Officer, the key consultee, on the basis that further information is required to understand the amenity impacts. And without their support, I find it hard to understand how it's been possible for officers to arrive at the conclusion that the amenity impacts would be acceptable. That is, a robust decision on this key matter requires that further detail and ultimately resolution of that concern. And for this reason, I ask that the committee refuse the resolution to grant permission this evening, or at the very least, defer their decision for further information to be provided and considered. If the committee were, however, minded to grant permission this evening, then it is critical that it is subject to the additional conditions that your late papers set out. Thank you.
Mr. Harris, thank you very much indeed for that. I think I said it was CERTA planning, but it's CERDA planning, isn't it? CERDA. I do beg your pardon. Right, so members, we just have the objector there. We don't have any other speakers speaking in favour of this application. Do we have any questions? Question from Councillor Powell. In fact, Councillor Powell, I think this is probably at Planning Committee this evening because you called it in, didn't you? Is that correct? Yeah, thank you. Councillor Powell, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I called it originally because of the concerns of the neighbours to this property. And because also NERT cannot be counted as a planning matter because of other items that the applicant had mentioned to various people in public that raised my concerns about what was going to happen here. It's not so long ago we had another very similar case in the area, this is a residential area. This is not for turning into resident homes for handicapped people or any, well, not being anti-handicapped, but it's residential. It's in its nature. It's a conservation area. So I find it very difficult to reconcile why indeed they'd want to change from C2 to C3, because the C2 allows them fully up to the 6 people they're allowed and can be monitored and all the rest of it. So if the committee are minded to approve this change of use, I would therefore ask and request that we add one additional condition, and that is the removal of permitted development rights. So at least we've got some sort of way of monitoring what's going on there, because I can see from based on the information I have that this could very soon and very quickly be turned into a much larger residence with many, many more people in. And I'll leave it there for the moment, reserve the right to come back later.
Thank you very much, Councillor Powell. Councillor Harvey Coggins, please.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that disabled people have to reside somewhere. Oh, sorry. But disabled people have to reside somewhere. So why not in a residential area? Sorry, I don't think this is working. Is that working?
No.
No.
That's right.
Okay, I'll start again. Thank you. I'd just like to say that disabled people do have to reside somewhere, and why not? Why not here? Basically.
Not quite the point.
Not quite the point I was making.
Okay.
Well, are you suggesting that they live somewhere that is non-residential?
I'm not turning this into a one-to-one about where handicapped people or anybody else lives. I'm
No,
talking about this
through the
property.
chairman, please.
Sorry, through the chair. I'm talking about this as property which has raised concerns with the neighbours and information I have, which if you had, you would be concerned as well about the possible future use of this place. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you, Councillor Powell. 1 second, please. I'm just going to ask, if I may, I'm going to ask the planning officer to come in at this point, please.
Yes, through you, Chair. Sorry. The in terms of the application itself, yes, a C3 dwelling house, you can have up to 6 people living there. The grey area in question here is the element of care for children. Children need a carer effectively. The Councillor Powell has asked for the removal of PD rights, and that is effectively done through the additional conditions that are set out in the supplementary. If we don't have them conditions, then we would be approving a C3 to C2, which could include, like I set out before, a care home, and for different sort of sectors of society. I'm not saying that that's not acceptable, but I'm saying that this gives more clarity as to what the applicants applied for, and it controls it. So whatever they want to change, if they want to change it in the future, if they want to go back to a 6-bed HMO, which they could do now, effectively we've removed the right to do that, so they will always have to come back to us. So that does give it a greater degree of control. It is a residential area. I agree with Councillor Coggins on that in that respect. It's as set out in the report. It is, in terms of residential impact, it's seen as acceptable. I would also highlight that the applicant submitted further information, and that's set out in the report at 12.3. We did ask for further information during the course of the application to really drill down into what they were actually applying for, and that's where we've got to the point where we are to be able to put this before you this evening.
Thank you very much, Kerry, there. And I believe Councillor Hughes, you wished to speak, didn't you, before?
Yeah, I just think it's very difficult to make recommendations on the basis of what seem to be speculation about what the applicant might do in the future, and also on the basis of private information that's not available to the committee. It seems to me in strictly planning terms, the use of the building is commensurate with what as it's always been used. Issues about parking and so on have been addressed. And it also seemed to me, we know, again, this isn't not strictly relevant to a planning issue, but it's as relevant to some of the comments, that we know that children who need care often have to be cared for far away from their families and other support networks. And it seems to me it may potentially be a good thing.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hughes. Okay, Councillor Rushton, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Microphone. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm more than happy with these additional observations and conditions, but I think it's appropriate conditions to add, but it won't be any further change. But obviously it has to come back to planning committee. So I'm more than happy with them. I just also want to, on the topic of other people speaking, I think that we should be a lot more compassionate in this debate and think about what language that we're using and using appropriate terms for disabled people.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rushton. Councillor Evans, please.
Mr. Chairman, I too found that the way the comments came across from Councillor Powell were rather unfortunate, because it is disappointing when you hear comments like that, that these people are to be pitted rather than comments made like that, because it's very unfortunate when people are disabled for whatever reason. But apart from that, I would move that we accept this application, because the additional conditions tighten it up. There are, if the footprint has not changed at all, there is sufficient parking, as we have been told, and the number of people that will be there at any one time to care for those people, that is all covered, and I think that it is sufficient, because they're doing a shift pattern anyway, so it's not as if there's going to be a massive number of vehicles there at any one time. And I think that it is going to not look any different to a normal property with 3 children in it. This is a much larger one than that anyway, which will accommodate what is required here. And so I think that that is why I'm moving approval of this application.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I have Councillor Anketel first, and then Councillor Ashton.
Second motion, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Anketel. Just before I go to the vote, Councillor Powell, I know you suggested you wished to speak. I think it was possibly to come back in terms of answering the point that was made. Would that be correct? In terms of the language that you had used, is that right?
It was purely, I'm sorry if it offended people, but it didn't come out quite how I wanted to come across. My point being that, yes, I totally agree. If you're in these conditions, it's excellent to do something like that, but that is not what the applicant has indicated that he's got in mind for the future. By putting these conditions on, then fair enough, that will hold him.
Okay.
But that is the point behind it. I've
I understand.
no problem with anything else.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Thank you for just clarifying that point. And in terms of what people may have heard locally about intentions, of course, we cannot adjudicate on the basis of, if you like, hearsay. And so we can only discuss this based upon the information we have in front of us. But I fully understand there are concerns locally, and I'm acknowledging that. Thank you. Councillor Thorpe, I think you wish to come in, but then we need to go to the vote. It's the quick point you wish to make.
It was just the point that it is a 6-bed home. We already have under the C2, they can have the 6 residents, the 3 carers and the 3 children. But the C3 would open the door, even though they're only, if you like, you could have 6 separate families, 3 of whom have got a child. So it would still meet the condition that we're putting down that only 3 children are there, but you can actually have 6 separate families in effect. So can that be tightened up a little bit?
Thank you, Councillor Salter.
I'm just going to ask for clarification, and then we go to the vote, if I'm honest. Kerry, if you're able to just clarify
yes,
that.
so
I hear your concerns there, councillor Salter, but the conditions restrict it down to the care for 3 children at any one time. So you can have families on top, or so you can have a 6-bed HMO as well as the care of 3
Not as
children.
well as.
So you'd have, that would be like 2 use classes in one property. You can have that.
Sorry, not as well as. A C3 would effectively allow for an HMO where made up of 6 separate families, 3 of whom have got a child, because there are 3 children in care. It ticks the box.
Oh, sorry, a 6-bed, 6-bed HMO. So you could, I hear what you're saying, but I think the conditions clearly cover. Well, I would also say that these conditions were taken from an appeal decision for a similar development, not in our district, but that's how we know that they meet all of the tests, because they were taken from an appeal decision.
I think if I can just follow on from that, I do think that the conditions which have been issued this afternoon, albeit slightly late in the day, do tend to tighten up the restrictions on this, because I think there is a feeling that we need to make sure that we take a belt and braces approach. Kerry Challoner has suggested that a previous appeal for a similar application has been used as a template for this. And I think as a local authority, we have taken every step we possibly can to make sure that the applicant adheres to the conditions. Obviously, if in future the applicant does stray away from those very strict conditions, then this planning committee will possibly be called upon to make further decisions. But I certainly understand the reservations and concerns being expressed by local people, and I think as a council we are aware of that as well, and it's absolutely vital that we make sure that this is not a cynical application to try and achieve something via almost a Trojan horse, because I think there is a feeling that there is a Trojan horse element to this possibly. Some people may interpret it that way. I would certainly hope not. We've had this application proposed for an approval, has been proposed by Councillor Evans, and it has been seconded by Councillor Anketel. Members, I wish to ask you for your opinion. If you wish to support the proposed approval, would you please raise your hands now? I think that's 9. Is that 9?
9.
Yeah, okay. Those against, please. And we have 2 against. Do we have any abstentions? 1 abstention. Thank you. So members, thank you very much indeed for deliberating that and coming to a conclusion. So I can announce that application 23/00216/COU has been approved by this planning committee here today. Thank you very much. So members, and for those of you who weren't here at the beginning of the meeting watching online, I have to say that I have a prejudicial interest, and for that reason I now have to vacate the chair, and I shall be handing over to the vice chair, that is Councillor Chetland. So if you just excuse me for a few moments while I remove myself, I shall be back for the ensuing application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Welcome to my first chairing of a planning committee. Let's see how it goes. Okay, we're going to be looking at application 23/00519/FUL, Orgreave Farm, Orgreave Hall Lane, Orgreave Allrows. We have a number of speakers on this. I think we've got Councillor Wilcox for. Councillor Wilcox against, Councillor Derek Cross for, and the agent or member of family is also here as well. That's correct. So we've got 3 speakers. Councillor Wilcox will get the opportunity to speak for 10 minutes, as will Councillor Cross, and the agent gets 5 minutes. So if you prepare yourself for this one, Karen Beth, need to talk us through, please.
Thank you, Chair.
This application seeks the retention of a two-storey modular office building for a temporary period of 2 years. The slide you can see at the moment, sorry. This shows this is a location plan which shows the A513 running along here, and this is the access into the site. Let me get to the next one. You can see it a bit clearer on here. So you've got the A513 here. There is a listed building here, which is Orgreave Hall and Stables. There are residential properties along here, and this section here is the location of the office block in question. These are existing buildings that are on the site. They're in this area here. This here is the office block that is for that application to be retained. This is looking from within the site near the already existing buildings with the office block there and across onto the open countryside. And this is the access into the site, which is here. And this farmhouse is empty at the moment. This slide shows the access from the A513, and you can see that there's a bus stop here which enables sustainable transport for anybody using the site. Go back to this. There are no other buildings within the farm complex which are suitable or available to provide office accommodation. The previously used office space has now become unavailable. The office accommodation is required to support the immediate ongoing operations of the applicant, who owns Orgreave Farm and substantial land around the site. The applicant is responsible for the arable farming of surrounding land. The proposals are considered reasonable for a temporary period, and no technical concerns have been raised which cannot be addressed via suitably worded conditions. The scheme does not result in harm to any heritage assets, residential amenity, or the Cannock Chase Special Area of Conservation. The site is also not within the West Midlands Greenbelt. The scheme is considered appropriate and acceptable and is recommended for approval, subject to the recommendations as set out within this report and the supplementary paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to ask Councillor Mike Wilcox to speak again. You have 10 minutes. If you're still going towards 10 minutes, we will tell you to stop.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Good to see you in the seat at last. Thank you. Good evening, Vice Chairman and members of the Planning Committee. I'm here on behalf of the residents of the area affected and Oros Parish Council. Lichfield District is classified as a rural local authority, with one of the factors being that its location is acknowledged as lying within a rural landscape. And Chairman, if I can just give you a definition of what rural says, and I quote, relating to or characteristic of the countryside rather than the town. And that description sums up absolutely the hamlet of Orgreave, where this retrospective application is being made in an area that is characteristically part of the countryside. One further definition, please, for you, Mr. Chairman. Hamlet, a small settlement overlooking open countryside. And yet, here we have, once again, another industrial outfit, like its neighbours, Cemex and Tarmac, doing all they can to destroy what little countryside we have left in our so-called rural district. So let's have a closer look at the site itself. The applicant states clearly that there are no other suitable buildings within this site to accommodate their business operation. Of course not. This is because the site is made of an agricultural farm with surrounding farmland. The site also consists of several agricultural buildings and a farmhouse. And a short stone throw away is Orgreave Hall Farm, which consists of several residential properties. And finally, Orgreave Hall and Stables, which boasts a number of fine Grade 2 listed buildings. Mr. Chairman and members, you will have seen in your papers that the site is sited within the 15-kilometre zone of influence for the Cannock Chase Special Area of Conservation, a body which we have representation on, and whose clear objective is to protect areas of conservation within Staffordshire, which we at Lichfield have an important part to play in. The applicant's previous location just off the A38 at Orivos was clearly a busy commercial operation and was ideally placed on the highways network. Any alternative location needs to have this accessibility to a major highways network, which is not the case in this application. Looking at the policy and principles of development, 10.8 policy ED1 of the Orivos Neighbourhood Plan provides support for sustainable growth and expansion of businesses and enterprise through conversion, extension and well-designed new buildings. I think you will agree, members, this fails on the last statement of a well-designed building, not a modular two-storey block. Turning to the assessment, the applicant seeks a temporary consent for 2 years, but we've seen this type of temporary condition before put in place. And before you know it, 2 years has gone and the applicant is back seeking an extension, which we have seen and granted all too often. It also states importantly in the last paragraph, and I quote, "The permanent retention of this building, given its appearance, would not be supported. The design and appearance impacts are discussed in further details under section 11 of this report." So what does section 11 actually say? It says, "It is acknowledged that the freestanding modular office building is of no design merit and is not reflective of a structure that would be expected in this rural location." So, Mr. Chairman and members, I pose this question to you. Why should we, the council, or more importantly, the neighbours, our residents, have to put up with a structure that has no design merit and would not be expected to be located in this rural location? But here we are looking at initially a so-called temporary two-storey modular building being placed here for a minimum of 2 years, possibly longer, who knows? Why can the applicant not look at other sites not so far away for their operations, like Fradley Business Park, a designated commercial site with good highways and infrastructure access? If I could now turn to the consultation process. Members, you would have thought that because of this very sensitive nature of this application, the applicant might have thought it would have been in their interest to engage and consult with both neighbours and the parish council, but at last it has not happened. This is not only a clear underestimation of local feelings, but to add insult to injury, the applicant has then decided to go ahead and put up the two-storey building anyway, not even considering that perhaps permission was required. If you look at the objections, there are many from both residents and the parish council. The industrial development is out of keeping in a rural hamlet, increasing traffic volumes, noise, not to mention disturbance to neighbours. Also, the purpose of the application is very ambiguous. HGVs and other large vehicles causing danger to other road users at this already dangerous junction, with visitors turning opposite this entrance to enjoy the site at Fradley Junction with its canal network. The cumulative effect of this development against the expanding operations of Cemex and the Orgreave Quarry operates 24/7. If we're not careful, we will turn this tranquil hamlet into a commercial area. Also, paragraph 85 of the National Planning Policy Framework says that it's important to ensure development is sensitive to its surroundings. I think, Mr. Chairman, if any of your members had actually been out to the site, they would have seen a two-storey modular building that certainly is not in keeping with the rural surroundings. On the contrary, it sticks out like a sore thumb. Finally, Mr. Chairman, whether members agree or not with the arguments put up or against this application, what isn't in question is the fact that the applicant has already placed the temporary building on this site without the necessary permissions of this council. Hence, the application is retrospective permission. We, as elected members, are entrusted to uphold policies, regulations, and follow our procedures, and to make decisions on behalf of our residents within the district. In fulfilling these responsibilities, they expect us to act fairly, openly, and with transparency, and act in a way that secures public confidence in our role as councillors. To that end, Mr. Chairman, there cannot be any other reason that we can be taken other than to inform the applicant that they have acted without the necessary permissions laid down, and they must remove the temporary building forthwith in line with our regulations and refuse the application. Please, members, do the right thing and uphold the public's confidence in what we are doing at this council to take these difficult but right and justifiable decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilcox, very eloquently spoken as usual. Councillor Derek Cross, to speak in favour of the proposal.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here tonight to speak on the basis that the objections which has been raised by Councillor Wilcox, I don't agree with. And I have various reasons here to state that. I've spoken to several residents myself, and we don't agree with everything he said here. I think they've misread what the application actually is, what the proposal actually is. This proposal has been through the council pre-app process. It's been assessed in depth and given in principle support. We also report to you all here tonight is consistent in this regard. But we mustn't forget that this is a temporary building. The temporary building for a building site. We've seen many modular buildings all around here with HS2, these white painted containers. This applicant builds these modular buildings. It was spare modular buildings they've got. Which would you prefer to see? If you want him to remove this, then he has a legal right under health and safety to have some sort of buildings on his site while he's carrying out his building works and renovations to the farm buildings. So you've got to consider, would you rather see this, or would you rather see half a dozen white painted containers in its place for health and safety, office and ablution facilities for the next 2 years? This is a precursor to the proposed refurbishment of those farm buildings and productive reuse at Orgrave Farm. It involves temporary development to enable this. All development of any scale requires this site presence and facilities for the workforce on site and is common in the construction industry. It will be common to this site as well when they start the building works to have other facilities like I've just mentioned to you. I am disappointed that the tenor of objections are ill-founded and therefore without substance as material planning matters. For example, rumouring that around the village that it is for a lorry park, when clearly it is not for a lorry park. It's purely to provide facilities for when the building and refurbishment works commence. And being in the industry for all my working life, I think it's very nice and luxury facilities. If you're manufacturing, you've got them on site, why not use them? Orgrave Farm is a long established working farm, and one cannot reasonably oppose development and refurbishment of its buildings, which supports its future sustainability and prosperity. This is for a temporary building within a substantial farm complex. There was no objection to a Staffs County Council height raise, LDC spatial policy team, LDC ecology team, LDC environmental health team, or LDC joint waste team. Item 10 of the case officer's pack policy and principles of development suggests it complies with everything listed there. In fact, para 84 of the framework supports growth and expansion of business in rural areas through the conversion of existing buildings to enable the development and diversification of agriculture and other land-based buildings in rural areas. There's been several complaints that's been made by the residents and the Council Wilcox, and I'll just run through some of these. They say the industrial development is out of keeping with the rural nature of the area around Orros Farms. The planning application to the temporary office unit is to provide a site office for the restoration of the existing farmhouse and barn. The office will be removed after the planned renovation is complete in 2025, at which the applicant will move from the temporary office into the renovated farm buildings. They also complain the height of the proposed structure will have a significant impact on local dwellings. The proposed temporary building will be rested on the proposed barn foundation, which is in your documents on the slab, which is constructed to a 58.50 height. The proposed building is to be 5.35 metres height, so it's lower. So that argument is out the window. The proposed 24-hour lighting and the impact on neighbouring properties, the lighting for the temporary unit will be as follows: 3 times downlighter units on the building over the two doors and the final one illuminating the car parking area. If they put conventional construction containers on there, they will have to provide that kind of lighting anyway, and probably more. So that one's out the window. The increase in traffic volumes, especially from heavy lorries and other industrial vehicles. This application will only generate additional lorries during the construction, which is already undertaken, and removal of the units. The farm will continue to operate as it currently does, as DEFRA registered farm. The additional vehicles, see Transport Statement IPD 22581, para 5.6, could be up to 46 vehicle movements in a day, of which 44 would be a car or van. I don't know where they get the lorries from. The remainder will be bus or coach, which is there every day now, movements per day, 2 to 4 a day. This could be a large 12-metre public unit. This could only be a minibus style. So that argument is out the window. The danger to other road users of heavy lorries slowing down on the A513 turning into the site. According to the design manual for roads and bridges, CD 123, figure 231, if the main line flow A513 is less than 13,000 vehicles per day, and the side road, farm road, is less than 300 vehicles a day, then a simple junction with no right turn lane is the correct form of junction. So that argument is out the window. The damage to verges due to large vehicles, which is already occurring and will only get worse if this application is made. No, the construction of a different development to the construction of a barn, groundworks, barn slab and drainage has resulted in damage to one of the three triangles of verge, the most westerly one. To prevent further damage, the triangle has been reduced in size on one side and a corner radius increased. The ground has been stoned up to provide an improved running surface, and this damage was undertaken as part of the temporary office application and should not be considered in this context. The works that's been carried out there should cause no further damage. They go on about works appear to be underway without permission. That's incorrect. It's only the site facilities being put up, and that's pretty normal in any site, and we've seen it all around HS2 and everywhere else there, all around us. So that's another argument out the window. That is a necessity. The existing strong objections from neighbours are fully supported by the parish council, and I note that. However, as this text proves, some of the reasoning is misguided, and the full details have been provided in the documents supporting this application. We would assume that the parish council will have full access to these documents, and so should have Councillor Wilcox. There was never discussed that we need to talk some of these things through. On the basis of a clear need case as an early step in a bigger picture of betterment, there is no planning case to oppose this proposal. The officer's report is clear and positive, and the recommendation should be accepted by all of you on this committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Croft. For robust presentation. The agent Naomi Light to speak next, please, in favour of the applicant. I just must tell you, you don't have the privilege of being a councillor. Disadvantage of being a councillor one way around or the other. But you have 5 minutes to speak, and you'll be reminded when you've only got 30 seconds left.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name's Naomi Light, and I'm speaking on behalf of the applicants at the Leavesley Group tonight. I'd like to thank the officers involved with this application for a thorough assessment of the proposal and its accuracy in the report. I think to start with briefly, I think it's beneficial for members to hear about the proposals in more context. The Leavesley Group, a group of family-owned companies that have been based primarily out of Orrewos for 100 years. JD Leavesley Estates is the largest of the group enterprises and farms around 2,280 hectares of arable and grassland in Staffordshire and Derbyshire. In addition to the food production, the agricultural operations include management of various tenancies, agricultural units, agricultural dwellings, fishing and shooting rights. Aubrey Farm is a traditional dairy farm with an array of substantial brick-built and steel portal framed buildings, alibi they're all in a state of disrepair. The farm is central in location to the land holdings and business operations.
As highlighted in your officer's report, an application for refurbishment of the farmhouse and coach house for office accommodation will be submitted imminently following positive pre-application discussions carried out earlier this year. The proposals will include the change of use of the farmhouse and rebuilding of the coach house to create a new estates office and ancillary accommodation. The use will consolidate staff and farm operations, safeguard jobs, and ultimately show a commitment to the area through significant investment and ultimately a modern farm unit for future generations. This application precedes the main change of use application, which in itself would justify it as site office. However, it's of note that irrespective of the outcome of any future change of use application, the farmhouse and buildings still require maintenance works, which fall outside the requirement for planning permission. There is still an immediate requirement for Leafsley staff operations, on-site facilities for farm staff, contractors and security. The estimated £2.5 million spend for phase 1 will require an immediate on-site presence for security, especially as the site is accessible to the public through various site rights of way running through the site. Without the unit, Leafsley Estates and Leafsley Group would not be able to perform effectively, and the refurbishment will not be undertaken efficiently, securely, or as planned. The unit itself is a typical non-foundational building found on the majority of building and construction sites. The unit has been cited to limit any impact on neighbouring uses and the environment and will be removed when refurbishments are completed. I think that forms part of a condition in all the recommended conditions. So the need case is compelling and is professionally supported through the recommended approval of your officers. JD Leafsley seeks committee support for the proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Naomi. Okay, if it's all right, I've got one thing I'd like to clarify first, if I may. Yeah, I think it almost got added within the second presentation. I got the impression from the first person speaking in favour of it that the building work is merely needed just for the building work when the refurbishment and additional build has been applied for. Is that the case, or is it required for stuff that is currently going on at the moment as well? I got the impression it probably is, but I just wanted that clarified.
Yes, Chair. The office block will be used as an office as well, because the offices that are used at the moment have become unavailable. So it's going to be used as an office block, but also will be used in future to for the change of use of the farmhouse and rebuild of the coach house.
Yes, thank you. Okay, I'll open to the floor. Anyone wish to speak, please? Councillor Salter.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, that third speaker there did suggest that it was needed at the moment for work that's ongoing that doesn't require any permissions on the existing builds. And yet it seems that they've put it there for use as an office because their office is out of action at the moment. It seems a backwards way of doing things. I don't know. Which is the case? Is it being used as an office because they haven't got an office elsewhere, or is it being used because it's needed for work on the existing premises?
Sorry, I'll just clarify. It's a bit of both, effectively. They haven't got any buildings elsewhere. They're consolidating their business as set out in the report. And there is, as the last speaker just suggested, further there will be a further application on this site. That's why we're looking at a temporary consent in front of you this evening, because this is as set out in the report. This isn't seen as a permanent structure that we would support.
Can I come back on that, Chair?
Certainly.
If it is used, it's currently being used and will continue to be used as offices, then there's less opportunity for it to be used as a site office. So it's likely then that more temporary structures will be needed to use as site offices. If and when permission is granted for the refurbishment of the buildings.
So the refurbishment plans for the buildings are to provide offices so that the temporary offices will move into the buildings. At this point, they're not ready for that, which is why we've got this temporary situation. So hopefully that clarifies.
So not quite. The application is to have them there because they're needed as a site office rather than having these white buildings that we see dotted around the HS2, etc. But it seems to me that if it's going to be continually used, even just for 2 years, as an office for the running of the company, then it won't be able to be used as a site office for the redevelopment. And so more temporary site offices will be required. So we're going to end up with the white buildings, the white porticos anyway.
So before us this evening, we've got a temporary consent for 2 years for that particular office building. I think the report clearly sets out that it's not a long-term solution by any means, but it is a solution that will support a viable rural business in our district. So in terms of what happens in the future, that would be another application before us. What we don't like to do in planning is to continually repeat a proven temporary consents, because then you get to the point, well, it should have been a permanent consent in the first place, and that's when you start asking them, quite rightly, start asking them questions. So in terms of what we've got before us this evening, it is a 2-year temporary consent. The applicants have applied for that, and in terms of the timescales, that gives them enough time to further develop their proposals, which have been subject to a pre-application with us, which I think is public information because they've just admitted it. So that's been with us for some time. So it's not like they are well aware of the timescales here, and they have to get their offices ready. Otherwise, they are going to be displaced.
It wasn't right, it was the actual use. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Joe. Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Quick question. This is retrospective. They've obviously known for a good while these works and that were going to have to be done. Why couldn't they get their planning in on time and have it done without it being a retrospective? Yet again, somebody's doing something, they're coming on to us and, oh, please, LDC, do let us have it. We've put it up now, what are you going to do about it? So I say, why? And have they not been more forthcoming and more forward planning to come to us and ask for it properly? So therefore, why should we grant them retrospective planning if they can't be bothered to come here?
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Evans.
Yeah, we might not agree with retrospective permission, but it does happen, and it happens quite frequently. And this temporary building for 2 years, 2 months, and one hopes that it will be stuck to that time. And I agree that a better design for a permanent building is necessary. But looking at the NPPF, it does say that there is a presumption in favour of sustainable development, and that means all types of businesses in rural areas. So I assume I'm right in that. And I also wanted to look at what Alderus Parish Council have said with their objections. They're referring to the proposed structure. Well, the building is there now, so it's not proposed, it's there. And when the other structure comes, that will be a separate planning application that we will have to look at. And they also ask as well about the height of the proposed structure. So I just wanted to ask a question before we get that far. If it's going to have a significant impact on local dwellings, how far are the local dwellings from where this building is presumably going to be placed? And it just concerns me that we do actually stick to the 2 years, 2 months, because I think that's essential. It doesn't always happen that they do stick to it, as we have evidence in Burntwood. I do think that the building as it stands now is not very attractive, but for 2 years, 2 months, I don't see any problem with that.
Thank you, councillor Evans. Anybody else wish to speak?
Can I have an answer to my question?
The office block is going to be is located here, and the residential properties are here. Okay, one here. Yeah. Okay, so just in this area here, and this is Orgreave Hall and the stables which are listed.
Chairman, can I just ask then, so therefore is, depending on the height of the building, obviously, but what kind of height would that be acceptable? Because that, in my view, is a fair distance away, the dwellings from the proposed area where the dwelling will be.
Okay, Chair. The building is 5.3 metres high, and I think you can see just about see the side of the office block there. So it's slightly, I think it's slightly higher than these buildings that are already there, but as you can see, they provide a good buffer between the office block and the residential properties.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak, or is anybody in a position to either propose for or against? Councillor Anketell.
I propose that we accept the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Ashton, thank you. So the proposal before us is that we accept the officer's recommendation in relation to planning application 23/00519/FUL. All those in favour of the application, please raise your hands. And all those against. That is carried. Thank you. Thank you very much to the speakers. You all spoke extremely well and got to your points very succinctly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, anyway.
Yes, I think this is good to be going up though. I'm going to.
Okay, councillors, if you want to take a couple of minutes break, do a comfort break, I think that's the expression. We'll be back.
So good evening once again, ladies and gentlemen. I'm back in the chair, and I must offer my thanks to Councillor Checkland for standing in for the last application in which I had a prejudicial interest. So we're now ready to resume, and the next one on the agenda is 23/00649/FUL. This is the multi-storey car park at Birmingham Road, Lichfield. And this has been brought to the planning committee, the main reason being that the local council, Lichfield District Council, has an interest in this particular application in this building. So to take us through this, and I'm sure that anyone who's lived in and around Lichfield for any length of time will be very familiar with this building, which is coming towards the end of its useful life. And I'm going to ask the planning officer next, which is Jed Goodwin Roberts, who's making his debut here at Lichfield. And we do welcome you, Jed, to this planning committee. Thank you very much. If you'd like to take us through this particular application, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairman. So this application is for the demolition of the multi-storey car park, which has been identified by the council as being in a poor state of repair with a number of structural defects. So it has reached the end of its useful life. The next slide. So as you can see, the car park is here. The car park has access from Birmingham Road, which sits to the east. And then we've got an entrance also from Frog Lane, which sits to kind of the west. And then our offices, which we're in at the moment, sit down here to the site. What you will see is the red outline covers this sort of a shape, and a comment has been raised by County Council regarding from the highways about the red line. The works or the proposed development would actually be taking place solely within the parameters of the existing car park. So no additional kind of footprint is going to be occupied from the development, but this just kind of shows the wider view, and some of the other plans shows a more condensed view down into it. So as you can see here, this is the car park. We've got the Frog Lane side of the car park here, and we've got the Birmingham Road kind of frontage of the car park there. Photograph 3 shows the upper deck of the car park. I didn't think it was necessary to put all photographs of the car park. We've probably all seen it. And then photograph 4 shows one of the staircases within the building. So this hopefully sets the scene. So what we have here on this slide is the proposed development. So as I said previously, the proposed development is all within the footprint of the within the footprint of the multi-storey car park. To the rear of the car parking, so this is Birmingham Road here. To the rear, we've got a flexible space, which is a lawned grass area. And then within the site, we've got new trees being planted. So for urban greening, we've got 2 areas of seating, and then surrounding it here, we've got food retail units, and I'll have an elevation on the next slide. And then we have pedestrian accesses kind of from in both Birmingham Road and also from Frog Lane. These illustrations show indicative illustrations of what the kind of the food retail cabins will be. So they're relatively compact, single story in height. They're constructed from wood material. They're relatively small in their footprint, so they're more akin to what you would see at your Christmas kind of markets that you get in the bigger cities. But these offer a sustainable use material for a temporary use. It should also be noted that as part of this application, the proposed use is for a temporary use for 3 years to facilitate a wider regeneration of this part of Lichfield city centre. And then the second one you'll see here is a communal block. This is for the use of the retail cabins only, and it offers staff facilities for kind of water access and toilets, etc. And here we've got some section drawings of the development and its wider setting. So we've got the Spire shopping centres here, and then it shows kind of the development site here and kind of the trees and how it sits within the wider area. And again, this drawing shows alternative sectional views through the development site. Here we have the 3D visuals of the what it's anticipated to look like. So as you can see, we have a lot of kind of urban greening with the trees, landscaped areas, and the hard surfacing is a porous surfacing. So any flood water or surface water flooding caused by heavy rain, like what we've seen recently, would be dealt with within the site, and it wouldn't run out onto surrounding roads. The illustration down here, we've got an indicative image of how it shall look. So you've got a fixed bench and seating within the middle square, soft landscaping around, and then around the edge of the site would be the retail food outlets. These alternative views, again, communal seating, so it's for users of all of the facilities would be using these areas here. And here's another view of what we've seen with that. And that is it in terms of for the plans. One moment, please. So this is the presentation part over. What I'm going to do now is run through the supplementary that was sent out later this afternoon. And there are a few points that have been raised on this, which I will go through now. So quite late in the application process, we did get comments from Staffordshire County Council from the Highways Department. We received those on Friday last week. And these have formed a number of points which I'm going to proceed to explain and provide the answers. They are written in this, so if you've got any other questions, please feel free to ask me. But I will go through them for the purposes of clarity. So firstly, we did get a comment from Lichfield City Council, who did comment on the application that the structure effectively is nearing the end of its useful life, and there are no objections to the removal of the building in principle. One of the concerns Lichfield City Council raised was that actually within the multi-storey car park there are 10 car parking spaces which are blue badge accessible spaces. What they had suggested is that they feel that 10 parking spaces should be provided within Wade Street to compensate for the loss of the parking spaces. What we have advised as part of this application is, yep, the building is at the end of its useful life. In terms of for accessible parking spaces, we have recently as 2020, we have had an additional 11 blue badge spaces added to Lombard Street's car park, and an additional 18 blue badge spaces have been added to the Bird Street car park. So whilst we may be losing the 10 in that car park, in recent years more have been added in alternative car parks. Notwithstanding that, we would be seeking a Grampian condition to add an additional 10 accessible spaces, blue badge spaces, to the Lichfield bus station car park, which sits very close proximity to the existing. So in terms of we're not displaced, whilst we have got access in other parts of the city centre, we have not displaced it too significantly if we can get this Grampian condition through. So that's that comment done. With regards to Staffordshire County Council Highways, they had provided with a refusal to the application based on 8 points which are set out as follows. Point number 1, no details of car parking usage, accumulation or capacity has been provided. During the course of the application, a capacity study was provided to the planning officer dealing with the application. A nighttime parking study was carried out between the 8th of July 2023 and the 23rd of July 2023 between 6 and 8 p.m. This is during the time when we would see peak use of the nighttime economy within Lichfield city centre. It was identified that with the removal of the Lichfield multi-storey car park, with the other car parks around within the city centre, there was a total on average of 492 spare spaces unused within the city centre. There are additional parking sites within the city centre, including the Friary, Lombard Street, Bird Street, Redcourt, Green Hill, the University and the bus station. So that 490 car parking spaces were picked up from the aforementioned car parking sites. Point number 2, no details of how the development proposal seeks to encourage walking and cycling have been provided. So the application itself seeks the consent for the demolition of the existing multi-storey car park and the erection of 15 temporary food retail use units. This is proposed to be a meanwhile use to facilitate a wider regeneration of this part of Lichfield city centre. As members should be aware, within the immediate locale of the development site, we have got Lichfield City bus station, and on the other side of Birmingham Road, we have got the train station. So we do have sustainable transport links into Lichfield city centre. Notwithstanding this, we have put on conditions to seek pedestrian linkages between the site and the immediate wider area that are appropriate. We have also added conditions on which are in the supplementary to provide cycle storage within the site, forming part of the conditions which have been refreshed. So to encourage sustainable transport, we have looked to provide enhanced pedestrian linkages within the site and the surrounding area, but also cycle storage for users of the site. Point number 3, which they raised, was no details of lighting have been provided to ensure that routes through the site are adequately lit, especially during the winter months. External lighting is now subject to a pre-commencement condition to ensure that all of the site is appropriately lit. Subject to this condition, it is considered that the proposal would be acceptable in this regard, with regard to the provision of external lighting. Point number 4, which was raised, states no details of how significant levels of differences between the application site and Birmingham Road. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Sorry. No details of how the significant level differences between the application site and Birmingham Road are going to be dealt with have been provided. There is a level difference of approximately 2 to 3 metres between the site and Birmingham Road, with the proposed development and demolition of the ramp access. This would lead to highway safety concerns of pedestrians using the adjacent footway. No details of boundary treatments have been provided to keep the highway users safe. So these are technical details which can be adequately controlled through the use of an appropriately worded condition. Such an approach would allow all technical consultees, including the Highway Authority, to ensure that the acknowledged interests are addressed. Therefore, a suitably worded condition is recommended to ensure that the Birmingham Road boundary is dealt with appropriately. It should also be highlighted that these matters would also be with separate building control regulations which fall outside the remit of planning, fall outside the planning process, and these would have to be required. These would have to be required from building control and regulations to ensure that development could be carried out satisfactorily in a safe manner for both during the construction and post when the site is being used.
Jed, can I just come in there, please? And very much appreciate you going through these different points. I think there are other 8 or 9, 8 of them in total, aren't there? Yeah, okay. So have all members got sight of those supplementary? You've all got that report, a supplementary report in front of you, have you, or on your computers perhaps? Yeah, okay, that's fine. So that if you want to just carry on then, Jed, thank you very much. But we've got 8 in all, haven't we? And I wouldn't read out everything that's in
fine.
Yeah, just summarize it, please, if you'd be so kind. Thank you.
So we have point number 5, no details have been provided with how the site will be serviced, including delivery vehicles and waste, etc. So a servicing condition has been proposed for its meanwhile use. Point number 6, no details have been provided for how a safe access for all users from Fog Lane is to be maintained during the demolition phase, as the compound proposed is located to the south, the car park entrance. So again, a pre-commencement condition detailing a demolition plan has been proposed, and this is within the list of conditions at the back. Point number 7, which has been addressed in the presentation, the application red line boundary. Again, if I go back 2 slides quickly, the red line boundary is here. So this is the whole entire site. And what the comment on point 7 is relating to is shown here. Basically, all of the works are contained solely within this site and not within other parts of the site. So that's why there was that conflict between the 2 plans effectively. So we've got that as the red line wider site, and then this is kind of more the proposed works. And finally, point number 8, the submitted demolition method statement is substandard with limited detail provided as to how the demolition of the multi-storey will take place without having an adverse impact on highway safety. Again, a more detailed condition has been put on within the supplementary to ensure that we get a satisfactory demolition statement. I won't go through the entire list of the conditions. What has been added on? Sorry, one moment. So we have had amended conditions and refreshed conditions as part of this application, which are based on the objections that were raised from the highway authority. And just one kind of thing to add is we did add a Grampian condition, as Afa mentioned before, to get 10 additional accessible blue badge spaces within the bus station car park. And that is it for me.
Jed, thank you very much indeed. I wonder whether perhaps either you or Kerry could just explain what a Grampian condition is in about 10 seconds, if it's possible to do, please. Thank you.
Yes, so as you're aware, members, the conditions have to meet the 6 tests that we've set out. They've got to be enforceable, necessary, reasonable, etc. A Grampian condition is where the condition, it falls outside the red line. So it's something that we need to secure, but it's not within the red line. So ordinarily it would fail one of the tests, which would be enforceability, but Page Law does allow us to, and that's what they're called, Grampian conditions. You can only use them in certain circumstances, and we feel that this is one that it could be used for.
Kerry, thank you very much. That was very succinct and I appreciate it. Thank you. We have one speaker, and thank you very much there to Jed for that presentation. So the speaker we have this evening is, we just have the one, it's an objector, Mr. Adam Lund is objecting to this application. And so if you'd like to take up your position, sir, by the microphone. I think having been here early, you'll know the form. You have 5 minutes. With 4.5 minutes elapsed, you will be reminded that you only have 30 seconds left. And at the end of the 5 minutes, you must stop speaking immediately if you are still doing so. Your time will start as soon as you commence. Thank you.
Good evening, committee. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name's Adam Lum, actually, and I'm the owner of Friary Shoes, which has been in Lichfield for 120 years next year. So I know a lot about Lichfield. Regarding the multi-storey car park, I do understand it is getting past its life. And the big issue I've got, we're losing 380 spaces to be replaced temporarily with 60. So the maths don't quite add up to me, because the location of that car park is fantastic, because it serves obviously all the 3 spires, it serves the Garrick. Now, I think you did the survey, but was it a week in July this year for the night time? 3 weeks. Now, it'd be interesting if that was actually done in Christmas, particularly when the Garrick have got their pantomime on, which is absolutely rammed. I think it holds 500 people, the Garrick. But also, obviously, that's stage 1 of the car park, so it's knocking down. So you've got, there's a new cinema going there, so I don't know where they're going to park either. Car parking in Lichfield has always been a major problem. It really has. And there was always a saying that always just made me giggle. It says, if you can find a car park space in Lichfield, well done, but don't be late because you get a ticket. But the thing is that the parking is a real issue. But with the demolition, it's the impact it's going to have on disruption, the noise. I mean, our business, our deliveries going that way, will we be able to get any deliveries? I don't know. We haven't seen anything like that. And also, that's the first stage of the Birmingham Road project. But the bus station's moving, isn't it, to the train station? So is the car parking that's already at the train station, is that going to go as well? I don't know. there just seems to be a real lack of transparency here, because the other thing that we found out, which is, it is related to this, is there will be a stage going on in the Birmingham Road project where our shop's going to be demolished. Like I say, we've been in Lichfield for 120 years. It's the same as, I think the 6 units going to be going all retail. And it's going to be replaced, well, basically with an open space. And we've got some temporary food huts going in, which is fine. And we've got a lovely open space where people can eat in our tropical climate. But the thing is, there are existing businesses in Lichfield, a lot of eateries that have really, really struggled all the way through COVID, as well, rehab as well. What's the impact going to be on those businesses? But like I say, the biggest issue is this is stage one of the Birmingham Road project. But I think the bigger picture is what's going to happen in the future, because lack of parking, lack of businesses, retail businesses, as like you say, there is going to be at least 5 going. And I don't really know what else to say, because it's really personal to me, because I think we are the oldest still in the same family generation, 120 years in Lichfield. And no one's had the decency to come and talk to us about this development and about what's happening. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think I've got your name incorrect. Can you just correct me again?
Lumb, L-U-M-B.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And apologies for the error. So thank you very much, Mr. Lumb. Incidentally, Friary Shoes, yes, it's a name that I've known all of my life. I think my mother used to drag us there to have our school shoes fitted in the days when you used to put your foot up and a lady would come along and make sure that the shoe was exactly the right size. And I think it was a gentleman called, was it Jerry Smith?
That was my granddad.
That was your granddad, Mr. Jerry Smith. Okay. My mother knew him quite well, apparently. I hope I'm not having to declare an interest here. So thank you very much indeed for that. And I'm hopeful that you were able to have some input from the other objector as well. Thank you very much indeed for that. Members, so you've heard comments there from the objector, very heartfelt as well. And I think most of us will agree that Lichfield's a very, very important city. And it's vitally important that we make sure that all our traders are happy to be here. So anybody got questions, comments they'd like to make? Councillor Powell, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, first of all, yes, well aware that the multi-storey is now well past its sell-by date. It's not coming up to it, it's well past. It's something's got to give, and unfortunately it's going to be that. However, I've got some questions. First of all, your bike parking policy, are you going to include with that a decent amount of bicycle lanes that are actually separated from pedestrians, so we don't have the usual thing of a bicycle running over people, which is fairly common? Could we have some better signage around town, preferably electronic, that actually lets people know where the other car parks are and what spaces are free, such as many other towns have, including Canterbury, I point out, which is an even older town than Lichfield. And do we have the offer of an alternative shops for those shops that are going to be demolished, or somewhere for them to go, or is that just it? You're on your bike, mate. And then last but not least, as to say, I support this all, because Lichfield's got to move on, but we do need to make sure we look after our people, such as Friary Shoes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Powell. I think Councillor Ashton and Councillor Hughes as well. Thank you. Councillor Ashton first, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. I've got 2 requests for clarification. In 11.8, it says an additional car park is provided within the town centre. What's that referring to?
So that is, sorry, just trying to find my bearings here. Adjacent to the council offices, the car park there, there's a newer car park that's opened up, which I think was the former police station building.
I think, well, that's a separate thing. It mentions that specifically, and it also mentions this additional car park in 11.8. So I'm not quite sure what they're referring to. It says there are 56, a new adjacent to the site of the former police station, new surface level car park has been created, which includes approximately 60 car parking spaces. An additional car park is provided within the town centre, providing an additional 60 spaces. I'm not sure what this second additional car park is referring to.
Oh, sorry. I think this one. So one moment, please.
Yeah, so just to reiterate the point you've made there, Councillor Ashton, as you say, 50 car parking spaces within the bus station. So that is not being questioned, is it at all?
No.
And adjacent to the site, former police station, new surface level car park has been created. That's 60 car parking spaces. I think you're okay with that as well, aren't you? It's just that you're questioning the mention of another 60 spaces.
In the town centre.
Yeah. Okay. So we're just awaiting. Okay, if you could come back on that then, please, Jeff.
I'm on that. Yeah, sorry, for the confusion on that. So yeah, it's the car park spaces we've got out here. So we've got the civic centre ones, and then what was in the former police station.
Okay, thank you.
So then accessible to the public, which I think I've been led to believe a lot of the members of the public haven't been made aware of that in recent years, that this is also available.
Right. Okay, thank you. My second point refers to, sorry, I yield.
I think this car park here is available to the public less than Saturdays, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
As Councillor Anketell, it is available. Microphone. It is available on Saturdays, yes, certainly, and I presume Sundays as well. And evenings after 6 o'clock. After 6 o'clock, it's available for public use as well.
Okay, my second point for clarification is 11.9. It's referring to 93 dwellings. I assume this is within the whole of the Birmingham Road site. Where does the figure of 93 come from?
So with regards to effectively what this point is saying is that this application site forms part of a wider site allocation.
Yes.
Identified in our local plan. In that local plan, it does say that that site, or the Birmingham Road site, which I think is site L26, is capable of delivering approximately 93 dwellings and a mixture of uses, including retail and commercial. So effectively what that's saying is that by us or the local authority earmarking that site as a site allocation, we acknowledge that we would be losing car parking spaces in favour of other developments. So effectively, at plan level, we've acknowledged that the loss of the parking in that site is acceptable. Sorry, that's probably not been succinctly worded in that regard.
Well, it's just the figure, because I'd heard substantially more than 93 in the past.
Could be more than that, and that's just what our local plan policy says.
93 seems to be a figure plugged out of thin air, but never mind. I think, addressing the whole of the committee here, I think we have to separate the demolition from what's going to come afterwards. If we delay too long bickering about how high the log cabins are going to be or what hours they're going to be, then nothing is going to get done. I noticed that we've got a 3-year time limit after permission has been given. And if we delay too long on details, then these wooden huts are only going to be up for 6 months or so. I think the public would like to see action taking place fairly quickly. They've waited long enough. Every time I talk to residents, everyone says, well, what about Kennings then? What's going to happen there? I think we've got to get going if we are going to get going. And it's important that we separate the demolition from detailed discussion at this stage, even if we agree in principle, but we cut out the detailed discussion of the proposed picnic site or whatever we want to call it. I would also second the proposal put forward that a condition of the demolition of the multi-storey triggers the installation of electronic signage, which provides visitors and residents with information as to the number of car parking spaces. So the demolition, that should be a condition of the demolition, that once the demolition has started and the car park is no longer available, that electronic signage be implemented.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ashton. Correct me if I'm wrong, I've got a feeling that this more advanced signage is being proposed for the city at some point. Do you wish to come back on that, please?
In terms of the advanced signage, it's something that does fall outside of the remit of this application.
Indeed,
so
yes.
we couldn't unfortunately put a condition, impose conditions on for this site because they would kind of be benefiting other sites. So this is something I think the district council would need to look into. At the moment, I don't have anything to hand to say.
Okay,
that's going to be happening.
Yeah, if I can just say, Councillor Ashton, I think it's a very good point that you make. I think actually, if we allow circumstances to develop in the way that I think they will, I think that signage is going to be forthcoming at some point. But I think it would perhaps be very difficult and inappropriate to try and link it to this application at the moment. But the point you've made is valid, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
If I could now move on to Councillor Hughes, please, and then we have Councillor Anketel and Councillor Powell and Councillor Vernon, and also we have Councillor Mears. Thank you. Any other speakers to come? And Councillor Evans.
Thank you
very much indeed. Okay, so Councillor Hughes, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Most of what I've wanted to say has been covered by Councillor Ashton and indeed Councillor Powell's notion of signage. I think clearly the car park needs to come down and it needs to be done, or at least permission needs to be granted so that hopefully it can be done quickly. I do think that we perhaps, it's unfortunate that not more thought or surveys perhaps to whether these food units, the sort of impact they will have on existing food outlets in the town. I note that there's a time limit that they have to shut at 8 o'clock, and I can see that's a good idea for local residents and antisocial behaviour, etc. It also worries those whether it makes them actually less viable, but that may be another matter. I think that this is stage one of a hopefully extended development. I agree that we need to think about what impact that development has on. I've taken my children to Friary Shoes, etc., and buy my, I have great interest in Friary Shoes, probably wearing them at the moment. But I do think the timing that they've got 3 years to do it, but no more than 3 years. We just have to hope that the council does get on with it so that it's not obsolete before it starts. And I do think we need to think about the impact of this development, of this stage and other stages of what's happening, the impact they have on existing enterprises in the city.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Hughes. I suppose I could use the old cliche, couldn't I, that you can't make omelettes without breaking a few eggs, and that probably sums this situation up to an extent. And I think the point you make about the impact it could have on other traders, etc., is valid. If I could now call upon Councillor Anketel, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, I think we need to find some additional car parking places within the city fairly soon. My observation over the past 15 or 20 years has been that shops open up and close, other shops close, and hopefully that when one of these vacancies happen, Friary Shoes will be able to get hold of the lease.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Councillor Anketel. Councillor Powell, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was just going to say, my questions weren't answered. Some of them have been now by other councillors, and thank you to those who mentioned them. But I've still got a couple. And one is, yes, what about bike lanes? You're not allowing for that. And the bike parking, how many spaces you're going to offer, where you're going to put them. And the second one is, what agreements or proposals do we have for those shops like Friary Shoes that are going to be reallocated, or sorry, not reallocated, basically forced to shut? What are we doing about it?
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Bennett. I'll call upon Jed then, please, to come back with the responses there.
In no particular order, the kind of questions raised by councillors. In terms of bike lanes throughout Lichfield city centre, that would be something, again, we couldn't control as part of this application because it's given to a specific site. So yeah, anything kind of cycle lanes going into the site, we couldn't really control with that. In terms of for displaced businesses, again, this isn't forming part of this application. We're talking about the demolition of the car park. And I understand, obviously, as part of the wider regeneration of Lichfield city centre, then would be businesses being displaced. However, at what we've got for the here and now, that's like we can't really consider in terms of moving. And I do sympathise with local businesses that may be displaced as part of the proposal. However, this is like, I can't really provide too much comment on at this stage. That's a wider thing further down the line.
Well, perhaps then somebody at some point would like to let those of us who are interested know what the proposals are, even though it's not to do with planning.
Okay, thank you. We'll leave that one there if we may. And I take your point, Councillor Powell, about things like cycle lanes. And I know that in this day and age, there is huge encouragement for pedestrianisation, people to walk from A to B and also use their bicycles as well. But that is probably for another day. Sorry, Kerry wants to come in on this one. Thank you.
Yeah, just to confirm, Councillor Powell, there is a condition for cycle storage on the site. So although we can't do anything about adding cycle lanes around the wider Lichfield city, we have made sure that there is appropriate storage on site, and that'll be done through a condition.
Yeah, how many spaces?
We haven't stipulated within the condition. We could, if members think that that is reasonable to do that. However, at this stage, given the scale of the development, we would suggest that that's open to the applicants too. But what we would expect is that there's enough cycle storage, which is set out in our SPD, so it meets with that, and it will be enough to serve not only visitors but also people working in the little huts. I don't want to call them huts, but yeah, you know what I mean. Yeah, so we have included that in the conditions.
Thank you for your answer.
And I wonder as well whether perhaps going forward, if this application were approved, of course, if it was found from experience that there was an inadequate number of bicycle parking, it would not be a very difficult thing to request an increase in their numbers. They're not an expensive thing to incorporate, I don't think. But thank you for the point you made, Councillor Powell. Councillor Vernon, please.
Thank you, Chair. This may be a very small point, but 15 food outlets, which is food and drink, tends to generate the need for a loo. Has any thought been given to the provision of a public convenience close by to these food outlets, which may be of importance to people, especially of my age?
Indeed, thank you very much indeed, Councillor Vernon. Yes, if we can just come back on that, that's a very valid point, of course, and I think all tourist areas, Lichfield, without a doubt being one, we need to make sure that there is adequate provision. Sorry. I'll just call on my Vice Chairman now.
Just in relation to toilets, it doesn't feel like that long ago we approved temporary toilets to be on the bus station, so there'll be new toilets there, which is right next to where the outlet is. So there are toilets there.
Thank you very much, Councillor Shetland. So yes, in close proximity with this site, I think there is adequate provision. Thank you. Thank you for the point you've made. Councillor Anketel, please. Oh no, it's not. It's Councillor Mears. I do apologise. I couldn't read my own writing. I'm so sorry.
Could we have the lights on, please?
Yeah,
Before we all disappear.
that's probably a very good idea. Thank you very much. Oh, hello, everybody. So yes, thank you very much. Councillor Mears, yes, I can see it now. The lights are on.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, Chairman. Just some points I want to make after listening to the presentations and everybody's questions. With the pedestrianisation that's going on in Lichfield, it's pushing a lot of parking out of the city as per pedestrianisation. Car parking spaces have been used by outside eating areas for cafes. And there's a lot of pressure to provide blue badge parking spaces. I know one of the suggestions is to provide blue badge parking spaces on Wade Street, which would just add to the congestion of coming around this one-way area. It would be better if the blue badge holders were nearer to the shopping, actually where the outside eating area is, close to the shops for the people that are trying to get there. If you don't put parking near to the high street, you're starving your own high street. So it goes against all the regeneration that we're trying to do within the city. Not only knocking down units that have had business in for over 150 years, but then removing the parking so people can't easily get to the shops. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy of doom, really. The Garrick needs the parking. Again, you'd be starving the theatre if that was made into an outside eating area rather than parking. And the train station needs parking for people that are using the trains, as do people that are using the buses. Having the train station next to the bus station makes it a transport hub. So why would you remove the parking, which enables people to use that as a hub? So that's my first point with regard to the definite need for it to be parking and not an outdoor eating area. These council offices are going to be rented out in the majority, I believe. The outside parking area is meant for the offices that are going to be rented out. So where will the staff park? There's not enough parking spaces in the adjacent parking area for all the staff that come into these offices, the council offices. I know there's suggestions for them to move to outlying multi-storey car parks and that they should walk in, but there's practicalities to take on board there. You know, if they're transporting files, computers, that sort of thing, it really doesn't work. You know, and also if you've got visitors, signposting them from outlying multi-storey car parks to get into the council offices doesn't look very professional, especially if we're trying to do bigger end projects like the cinema and the big developments, the housing development on the corner. This outdoor eating area, excuse me for speaking in layman's terms, looks like a bunch of garden sheds with no electricity and no facilities with security to match. There is a facility like this already at the plant park in a secure, contained environment. You are creating competition against businesses that already exist. Where's the validity in that when we're supposed to be supporting local businesses? So this application is for change of use and demolition. I was of the understanding that applications could mainly be for one thing, a single thing. Are we discussing change of use or demolition? And these buildings, these garden sheds, would effectively be in competition with market stall holders. I'd be interested to know what provisions are going to be made to support existing market stall holders with the 15 or so shops that you intend to put here. That's all that I've got to say on that.
Okay, that was quite a lot.
Yeah.
I'm honest. No, that's not a criticism. That's just a statement of fact. Right, Jed, if you'd like to come back on that, please, because Councillor Mears has raised quite a lot of points there, if I may say so, and obviously looked at reasonably objectively, quite a lot of negatives there as well.
Please forgive me if I've missed out some of the points. There's quite a lot there, so if I've missed things, just please tell me if I have missed them. A few of the councillors have raised this comment in terms of local businesses, but also kind of what you just said about the competition. If we take it from a broader, wider approach, the National Planning Policy Framework seeks increased vitality within city and town centres. The proposal of introducing these 15 units increases the vitality of Lichfield city centre. It provides an alternative kind of food retail establishments that we don't have in the area. Also, we do have quite a strong tourist we've got a lot of tourism within Lichfield city centre, so this offers an alternative kind of use within Lichfield city centre, where perhaps the more traditional going to a restaurant might not, if you're coming here for a few hours on the train up from London or somewhere like that, this offers a quick bite to eat kind of in a semi-informal setting. These sorts of kind of pop-up things are quite successful in lots of places. I know in London we have box park in a few parts of London, and that has places like Croydon have really kind of uplifted the town centre, bringing people in. So that aside, again, the big kind of concern you've raised is actually with the parking. What I should add to that is we do have a gramping condition that we did add. So I know there was potential for a discussion of 10 spaces on Wade Street for accessible parking. What we have done is suggested a gramping condition for those 10 displaced spaces to be put into the bus station. Therefore, we're not actually moving those accessible spaces to more inaccessible parts of the city centre, so they're quite close by to where they are, but this was added into the supplementary today, so this has been outlined in the report, so that's why that may have been missed. In terms of for the parking, we do have we had a study done within the month of July, and it did identify that we had 492 unused spaces. So if you look at the loss of the 360 odd spaces, 380 spaces in the multi-storey, combining it with what we have unused, we still have 112 spaces surplus, even with the loss of that car park. So we have that surplus there, so that's one thing. Not only that, in terms of staff parking, yes, we do have a staff car park here. Staff at the Civic Centre are encouraged to park at alternative parking spaces throughout the city centre. We're already doing it, and it works quite successful in that regard. And I think I have covered. Sorry. Oh, you mentioned about things to do with the security. This is a town centre location. There are cameras proposed within the development. You're right in saying that there's furniture that would be left out permanently. These would be affixed to the ground. So, if we were to have, in the unlikely event of an antisocial behaviour thing, the furniture couldn't be picked up easily to be used.
And that is a police issue anyway. That's nothing to do with the planning effectively. And police architectural officer will have had a look at that as well. The point was made by Councillor Mears about the impact on established businesses. And I think that is something which we're all very, very aware of. And I think some of us feel quite uncomfortable about that. For obvious reasons. If you'd just like to address that slightly, please, if you would, very, very quickly, because I know that was effectively the thrust of Mr. Lum's argument as well, that the effect it was going to have on businesses which have been in the city for a very long time.
Yeah, in terms of for the use or potential concerns with, say, competition and stuff, national planning policies do look to provide alternative and intensified uses within town centres. So the additional 15 food retail units in this location does increase the vitality of Lichfield city centre. From a car parking perspective, as I've mentioned before, we did have, through the month of July, it was identified we do have 492 unused spaces. So that was a snapshot for the month of July, and it's likely that would be a similar snapshot throughout the majority of the year. So we do have parking provision within the town centre.
Jen, I don't wish to be devil's advocate here, but I think it might look as though I'm jumping on board supporting Councillor Mears. What I was going to say was that is not necessarily representative, and I don't wish to be controversial, but just that 3-week period in July does not reflect the situation, shall we say, as was mentioned, in December when the Garrick Theatre has the pantomime. I think it is quite possible that we may see parking provision in the city compromised. I think that's not an unreasonable statement to make. But at the same time, I realise that this multi-storey car park has reached the end of its useful life. And I noticed that the conservation officer also very interestingly termed it brutalistic in its design, which is not something we want to see in Lichfield, I'm sure, especially in a conservation area. But I think this is a very difficult one really to come to terms with, because we can all see the necessity to get rid of the car park. That has come to I think it's nearly 60 years old, that car park. But at the same time, we can see there are going to be some ramifications for others as well, and lack of parking potentially. I also have Councillor Evans and Councillor Harvey-Coggins. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Evans, please.
I just wanted to, when I looked at the consultation responses, the police are referring to CCTV. Now, I know that CCTV is going to be updated across the whole of the district, but I would have thought that it is essential that some kind of CCTV is included as soon as possible into this development, because I think it's the long-term vision as well as the proposals for the future that CCTV is going to be crucial. That is the one point I wanted to make. The other point is on the when we actually come to the demolition conditions, what are going to be the hours? You can't tell me now, but that's the hours of demolition are going to have to be looked at very carefully, because in a city centre site, with it can really affect both residents, the retail outlets, everybody really that's coming into the area. So that will have to be very carefully done, because we don't normally have demolition on a Sunday when the place is likely to be slightly quieter. So I'm just urging people to consider very carefully the hours of demolition for the benefit of everybody that will be in the city.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Yes, absolutely. That has to be paramount, doesn't it? Because it's likely to have an impact on a lot of neighbouring residents' lives, certainly. Can we just come back on that point, please?
Yeah, just to clarify, the CCTV is included as part of the proposals that are before you tonight for the use, the meanwhile use, as it's been called. The demolition hours, they are included in condition 5 in the updated conditions, and they have been, for want of a better word, beefed up. They include restrictions for times for demolition activities and deliveries of material to and from the site, because we acknowledge that there are residential properties around there, and everybody has a right to a quiet life effectively, and we want to make sure that that's reasonable. That I think there is 2, 4, 6, there's 8 or 9 points on there that the demolition plan that needs to be submitted and approved by our environmental health team and the highways authority. It includes how noise, vibration and dust associated with the demolition will be dealt with. So that has really been belt and braces, that's really been expanded upon, and that forms part of the recommendation before you.
Thank you, Kerry. Yes, if you look at condition 5 on your supplementary, members, it does detail quite strict controls there. I now have Councillor Harvey-Coggins and then Councillor Checkland, and then I'm going to bring this to a close. Councillor Harvey-Coggins, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to address what you said about brutalism and what I thought of the original report. It was a shame that the original report was so disparaging of brutalist architecture, and although that what we can see out the window is not necessarily a good example, you only have to look towards Birmingham to see many buildings that are brutalist and protected and also very popular, and that we do in Lichfield have different eras of architecture right next to each other, for example Tudor and Georgian, and that Lichfield is a city of history, both ancient and modern, and I don't think that we can just erase modern history. And also that I don't think that we come to planning committee to judge previous fashions for architecture. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I'll take on board your comments. Thank you. Councillor Checkland, please.
Thank you, Chair. Some excellent points made all round. I think we've argued in every direction. The reality is the car park is almost condemned. So as far as I'm concerned, we haven't really got a lot of choice but to say that it goes ahead. In relation to the rest of it, the whole point of the long-term structure of Lichfield and the way that things are trying to move forward is to create a better and better environment. Amongst those things are trying to encourage people, force people, drive people, wrong expression, to walk more. So it's a move towards pedestrianisation, it's a move towards bikes, it's a move towards removing the pollution from town centres, it's a move towards changing the open spaces into usable open spaces. Now, we could just leave it blank, like the land over there. That hasn't gone down well. So the fact that we've got a proposal to do something with it, I think is brilliant. I understand that people do like to drive next to where they want to go to. But if we don't start forcing some people to actually do some walk, they're not going to walk. I admit, if someone wants to go shopping, they're going to need to take the car down. If they want to go down for a meal, then they might have a walk down. The timings of this particular proposal, I quite like, because it's not in direct competition to the other end of town, market, the food areas down there. It's outside a cinema and, well, a future cinema and a theatre, which are ideal places to go to eat just before 8 o'clock when you want to go and do something else and make it an afternoon stroke evening of it. Cycle lanes, I have a view on cycle lanes, which I probably shouldn't air here. We don't have any, it's rubbish. It does actually fall under the county council remit in relation to the way in which roads are laid out. Yes, the city council and district council do have some say over cycle provision and parking provision for bikes. My personal ambition would to say 200 parking spots. And that really would be a statement to, look, you can come down here, you can have something to eat, you can go to the cinema, you can cycle, obviously put your lights on if you're going home afterwards. So we are damned if we do or damned if we don't. So I'm going to propose that we accept this proposal, because we're damned if we do or we're damned if we don't.
Thank you very much indeed for that summing up, Councillor Checkland. Right, well, I did say that.
Sorry, I did say that he would be the final speaker, and he has proposed approval in line with the officer's recommendation and incorporating all the conditions which have been submitted to you all this afternoon under the supplementary report. So that is being proposed for approval then by Councillor Checkland. Do we have a seconder for that at all? Councillor Powell, thank you very much indeed. You're seconding that officially. Could I then have a show of hands then, those in support of the proposal to approve this application that sits in front of you at the moment? Thank you. Show of hands, please. I think that's unanimous. That's NEMCON. Yeah, that's unanimous. That's 12. And thank you very much indeed for that. Thank you very much for all your comments, your questions. I think in the summing up, Councillor Checkland did say, we're damned if we do and damned if we don't, and I think that probably is correct. We had to come to a conclusion. We don't live in a perfect world. I rather wish, I hope we don't live in a perfect world, because I think that would be utopian, and I don't think any of us can envisage living in a utopian world. We have to make do with the world we have, with all its deficiencies. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the objector as well for speaking this evening. Thank you, sir. We now move on to the next application. So if you'll just give me 30 seconds whilst I just change the screen on my computer. Okay, so if we're ready to go on this, Members, we're now going to discuss application 22/01533/FUL. FUH, which is the retrospective application for the retention of a detached double garage at 9 Foden Close, Shenston, Lichfield. Anyone who sat on the planning committee prior to the election in April will probably be familiar with this one. This application has been before the committee 3 times previously and has not yet been determined for a variety of reasons. As a result of this, the applicant has appealed to the planning inspector for non-determination by this authority. When this happens, the planning inspector becomes the decision maker, and the council no longer has jurisdiction over matters in relation to this application. With regards to our purpose here tonight, it is important that the committee meets to discuss this application so that it can advise the planning inspectorate of what this committee's decision would have been had the case been determined by us. According to our constitution and the Local Government Act, the committee has the right to hold such discussions in private. However, following a pre-committee meeting last Thursday and in consultation with the Deputy Monitoring Officer, I have determined that it's appropriate to hold the discussion in public to allow objectors to attend and speak. I would remind speakers at this point that when they do speak, they must keep their comments to planning matters only. Whilst we recognise there are frustrations in the process, I need to remind you all that these are not material planning considerations which we can consider at this planning committee. Should anyone try to speak inappropriately, I will stop them should they stray onto such matters. We need to hear the concerns about the material planning considerations of this case and nothing more than that. So should the committee feel that confidential legal matters, for example, those subject to legal privilege, need to be discussed, we may then have to move this discussion into private session. The outcome of tonight's discussion will then be considered alongside all other evidence by the inspector when he or she determined the application, including representations received by local residents and groups. Such decisions can take up to a year to determine by the inspector, but it is sincerely hoped that it will be determined a great deal more quickly than that. Should the appeal not be validated by the planning inspectorate, the report includes a resolution to delegate the power to officers to issue the decision notice in line with the decision taken by the planning committee tonight. I trust that that helps to explain the situation we now find ourselves in, and I'm going to hand over to Kerry Challoner, who will introduce this item now. Thank you very much, Kerry.
Thank you, Chair. So the fourth and final application we're looking at this evening, just get to the right screen, is 9 Foden Close. This is a retrospective application for the retention of a detached garage. And that there on the screen is the location plan showing the site just at the top of Foden Close there, and where the marker is where the garage is situated. To the rear of the site is the Lannis lands, open space on the edge of Shenston, and then the area around the site is residential in character. It's just the aerial view there. The site relates, the application was originally called in by Councillor Salter on the grounds of design, residential amenity and conflict of planning policy. So we're looking at a detached dwelling at the western end of Foden Close in Shenston. The garage has been constructed, as you can see on the left-hand side of the screen there. This site here is number 11 Foden Close, with that detached garage already in place. The objections have been received as set out in the report from the parish council and neighbouring occupiers. So turning to the main consideration, the design of the garage has been constructed in matching materials, it's domestic in scale and reflects the surroundings of the site. In terms of residential amenity, it is not considered to result in a significant loss of light, and the garden area of 90 square metres is retained by the property in accordance with our SPD requirements. A high standard of amenity is maintained by the development. In terms of policy, with regard to local and national policy and guidance, it is concluded that the scheme is acceptable, and as set out in previous planning committee meetings, previous iterations of the report is the recommendation is, of course, to approve subject to conditions. I would draw your attention to the supplementary paper issued this afternoon, which confirms that minor amendments have been made to the recommendations of the report, with the additional recommendation that's set out at 2.4. I won't read it chapter and verse, but the application is now subject to an appeal for non-determination. That means that we are critically not the decision maker at this point. The planning inspector will make the decision. The inspector will have access to all information, including the recording of this meeting, and we'll take that into consideration. Appendix C, the report does have some appendices. Appendix A is the report. Appendix B is points raised by Councillor Salter at the last meeting, and Appendix C is an officer response to the 13 points raised. Some of which were in the original report, some just to conclude that it's all in one place for ease of reference. And that concludes my presentation this evening.
Kerry, thank you very much indeed. I think this is the first time that I've had any experience of the planning process on and off for 20 years now, that we have had one that has come back to this committee and appeared 4 times. So it is, I think, from my experience, this is unprecedented. We have 3 speakers, the first of whom is the objector. This is Mr. Andrew Bewes. Mr. Andrew Bewes, you have been to the committee before, so you do know how it works. 5 minutes is the time you are allocated. If you'd like to take up your position, please, by the microphone. And with 30 seconds left to speak, you will be reminded of that by Mr. Hooper on my left-hand side. So you have 5 minutes in total. Thank you.
Chair, I'd just like to circulate a drawing for the committee members.
Okay.
It's important that I show you.
Yeah, I think the only problem is that because we haven't had previous sight of it, so we probably aren't allowed to do that.
Just a picture of the garage. It's nothing of any difference.
Does that picture?
It's a side picture of the garage that's relevant to what we're presenting this evening.
Well, if it's a photograph, is it? Okay, well, if it's a photograph and not an artist's impression, then I think that is considered to be factual.
Can we formally object to that? All the dimensions are in the plan. You can't do that. All the dimensions are in the plan.
Is it not appropriate? Okay, I beg your pardon, probably. Okay, I'm being overruled here, I think, so.
These are dimensions.
No, you can't do that. Yeah, you can't do it.
One second, please. Order, please. A request has been made to submit a photograph.
Perhaps if you looked at them.
You can't do that.
No, okay, I'm going to say no, I'm sorry.
It has to be noticed, you can't do that.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Let me take charge of this. We've had a great deal of controversy. This application has caused enormous controversy over the last 8 months. If there's going to be something contentious like the late submission of photographs, I think probably I'm going to rule that we can't do that. I think it is going to be too controversial.
Could I just say that we were only informed that we could actually attend to speak today, this afternoon at about 4 o'clock. So we didn't have time to present anything. And it is an actual photo of the side of the garage and a photo of the plans that you've already seen.
Okay.
We didn't find any legislation to say we couldn't do that.
Thank you, Mr. Bewes. As I said,
Chair, sorry, could I add that this committee was presented with 10 pages, including 17 points on conditions on my application at 5:05 this evening.
Indeed, Councillor Salter, I'm aware of that, and I alluded to the fact earlier that we don't live in a perfect world. I'm very, very sorry that the information was submitted quite late in the process. The nature of supplementary planning is that it is very last minute, and I'm afraid that is the nature of the beast. So I can only apologise for the fact that there are deficiencies, but I'm afraid they are necessary to be like that. In order to maintain this meeting, I'm going to suggest that the photographs which you'd like to supply will probably be inadmissible. I'm awfully sorry about that. Okay, but I need to be consistent here, and at the same time, I'm aware of the fact that this application has been around and this planning committee for a long, long time. We must reach a decision, and I'm minded to say that obviously this decision is not final, in the sense that all we are doing is giving our view to the planning inspector. Okay, so this planning decision tonight is not necessarily binding. It depends what the inspector says. Okay, if we can now move on then, please. As I say, I've been part of this process for quite a long time now, and I think it's absolutely vital that we reach a conclusion within a reasonable time frame. Mr. Buse, you have 5 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Councillors, we've now submitted our appeal to the outcome of the complaint, which still leaves many areas unaddressed to why this application should be refused. Within the redacted report, the planning team state that the 13 planning policy breaches have not been broken down to highlight the relevant pages and paragraphs within these policies. That's in this Appendix C. This is incorrect. We're aware that the applicant has submitted an appeal to the planning inspector due to the delay in the decision. Part of this delay is down to his own actions by informing Richard Sunter that he had served notice on ourselves on the 16th of November 2022. At every opportunity, we have informed the planning team on multiple occasions that the retrospective plan build is not in accordance with either the plans on the planning portal or those served on us. As the planning team don't seem to understand our complaints upon the existing build, we wanted to issue that drawing this evening, that picture out this evening, because we object on 3 points. We were trying for clarity. Obviously, we've been shut down on clarity's point. According to the plans and the redacted report in para 16.10, we should be seeing a sloping roof as we look out of our bedroom window. Our previous structural engineers' impressions were ignored by the planning team. However, in an ironic twist, T. Smith Roofing and Renovations have now built the garage, so we're not looking at theoretical things, we're looking at actual builds. And you can see from the picture that we would have distributed, the actual build error is highlighting a whole lot of problems here. For clarity, on the plan, we were going to show you on the left-hand side of the page, the roof of the centre line, or the centre line, should be back from our garage. The picture that we were going to show you on the right-hand side of the page clearly shows the roof being well ahead of our garage by 3 foot. The highest point of the roof should be approximately 5 feet back. Due to this design fault, the garage protrudes further than 3 metres ahead of our garage by 1.5 foot, so not in accordance with the plans. A smaller garage puts the roof totally out of line with the plans, significantly affecting our view. The plans state the garage is 6 metres long. In actual fact, it's been built to 4.5 metres long. Again, if we could show you the drawing, would be easy to explain. The picture, without a shadow of a doubt, shows the build is fundamentally wrong on 3 accounts. All you needed to do this evening was look at the plan and then look at the build garage. For yourselves as councillors, we appreciate that it's important that any interaction with the public is fair, clear and transparent. Otherwise, the media take interest as they have to date. For whatever reason, the planning team have desired to go against normal practice and protocol and want to make you complicit with their actions. I refer to this discussion today as an example of their desperation to only show you their incorrect version of events. Originally, the planning team wanted to make this meeting in private until we challenged the plain unfairness of such actions. This application should have been refused from day one. just based on the comparable refusal on Oakwood Close for a 2 metre high fence, let alone a 3.7 metre high double garage. The interpretation of backland has been manipulated to suit the planning officer's version of events. At first blush, the legal precedent stated in Appendix C, Tesco versus Dundee City Council, bears no relevance to English law. Dundee's in Scotland, and Scotland has got its own primary planning legislation. If you read through the planning team's reports from the start of this, they contradict each other. That in itself should prove zero trust or confidence in this application being approved. The planning team are concerned about costs being awarded against them. They don't need to be concerned. The garage has been built incorrectly, as outlined, as would have been outlined in the handout, but we've been refused to come up this forward. I invite the planning committee to look at, to view our objections as an opportunity akin to the proverb, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and use it as a chance to reject the application without damages. Just by looking at the pictures alone, we ask you in good faith to refuse the application or at least abstain from voting and allow the process to be transparent and dealt with by the planning inspectorate.
Mr. Hughes, thank you very much for that. I'm now going to call upon, thank you very much, sir. I'm now going to call upon Councillor David Salter, the ward councillor, who I know has taken a very, very considerable interest in this application throughout the whole process. Councillor Salter, you will be aware of the fact you have up to 10 minutes should you wish to exercise your prerogative. Your time will start as soon as you commence speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Colleagues, this is not an enviable task for you. Not only is this a complex and convoluted case, making it difficult even for long-term experienced members to resolve, it has also been running since before the makeup of this present committee was formed. Meaning that the majority of you are new to this committee and were not present at its first two hearings, and with the greatest respect, of course, so may not be fully conversant with all of the issues and problems that your predecessors sat through. You will have read the 30-page report from the planning officer, where on page 2 at 3.7 it states, as a reason for the deferment, that I raised 13 points. And these included, as you'll recall, neighbourhood plan policy breaches, infringements of planning policy and contraventions of planning legislation. That statement was in fact slightly misleading for you because the few of you who were in attendance at the very first hearing will recall that every one of those breaches was individually reported during the objection reading. They were then all individually repeated by me at the second hearing. And the fact is, therefore, I did not raise them on the 3rd of July. I stated that they had still not been fully addressed 5 months on. I can see that, as the report states, a couple of the points had been commented on between times with interpretation of policy, but they had not all been covered. And there is still confusion. Example, at the foot of page 17, it says, Councillor Salter in his 13 points does not identify which part of policy CP3 that he considers the application to contravene. Yet earlier in the document, on page 11, the officer had already clarified the points by quoting at 13.1, Core Policy 3 of the Lichfield Local Plan Strategy states that development should protect the amenity of our residents. It doesn't need clarifying. At our meeting of the 3rd of July, I also pointed out that it was this very council which granted permission for the Millbrook Estate to be built, which, as a design feature of the entire 120 home development, included the provision of unhindered open aspect views. I've learned this last week that to further strengthen that legacy, as part of the Millbrook development, there is actually a restricted covenant forbidding the building of additional structures to protect its special layout and character in perpetuity. All residents will or certainly should have copies of that document within their deeds. I'm very aware that the covenant is technically a civil matter. However, this council is currently creating a new local design code, which states, and I quote, is being devised to preserve the district's character and heritage for all scales of development and is a supplementary planning document which will provide good design requirements. To quote the then council's cabinet member for housing, Councillor Angela Lax, what has been missing from the planning system is the ability for planning authorities to make sure developers meet the clear expectations of what residents want in terms of design, quality, beauty and sustainability. The aim of the local design code is to reflect, through detailed consultation, good quality design approved by residents. The whole road objects to this application. There are 10 bullet point indicators for the local design code. While 4 of them deal with issues such as transport, work and play, climate change and biodiversity, at least 6 of them can be used to argue against permitting this development. Local character and building heritage, street design, a coherent pattern of development, character of the building, space standards and accessibility, and creating and maintaining a legacy. Surely such a covenant, which itself created a legacy designed to protect the character of a much loved and valued area, must carry weight and form part of the decision making when it is mirroring exactly the standards and ethics of our own local design code. One of the early and continuing arguments raised against this application was the refusal, not only by this council, but also by the Inspectorate of Appeal, of an application in 2020 in a neighbouring cul-de-sac on the same estate, Oakwood Close. On my submission of that case as being a precedent, the officer dismissed it as being dissimilar and therefore not comparable. He was right, in as much as they were different. That application was for a fence just 2 metres high that would have blocked views. This is for a building 3.7 metres high, and I don't recall it being transparent. However, the Oakwood comparator within this latest report has moved from the originally quoted impact on amenity being a straight not comparable to the impact on amenity being not significantly affected. That's quite a climb down and shows that officers' minds have shifted towards accepting that the comparison is closer than they had first declared. Moreover, the inspector in the Oakwood case also said that it was a small number of people affected, but nevertheless, for him, that was enough to reject the application. There are no fewer than 13 objectors in this particular case. The inspector also quoted from the covenant, where it states no fence or screen or wall shall be erected in the front or side garden. This restriction invalidates the interpretation in the officer's report at page 20, which attempts to show that the backland ruling cannot be enforced because it can only be backland if it's behind the rear building line. So if it's not backland, then it must mean that it is deemed as side or front garden. Well, according to the inspector, that should not be built on either. There is still the outstanding situation that the plans on the LDC portal do not match the plans served on affected parties, and the now finished building does not conform to either of those plans. The fact that this has now come back to committee for an unprecedented fourth hearing must in itself prove that there must have been very significant problems and issues. The only thing that has changed since the outset of this debacle is that the garage has now been completely built without permission, and even that is not in accordance with any submitted or published plans or applications. There are still unanswered questions. Does the applicant have a valid certificate of ownership of land? Why has this come to committee now before it is even known whether the inspector has accepted the appeal for non-determination? It would normally be after that, and then comments would be requested of this council as to why and the reason for not making the decision. I think there's still the contradictory points within the supplementary papers that we just had. The very first note at 2.1 says that the application will be determined by the planning inspectorate. That is not the case at the moment. It's still waiting for the inspector to accept the appeal. And so any decisions or points that you might make this evening in respect of a vote are pretty much invalid anyway. It's not for me to advise you how to vote, but I would remind you all that you are not now actually making the decision. And if you're not completely certain either way, then if it does go to a vote, then you should abstain. After all, it is already set to most likely be determined beyond these walls. Thank you.
Councillor Salter, I know that you've put an awful lot of work into that, and this has been something in which you have taken a considerable interest, as I mentioned earlier, for a very long time. Thank you very much indeed for that. And I now will call upon the speaker on behalf of the applicant. This is Dr. James Spooner. Dr. Spooner, you have 5 minutes, and with 30 seconds still to elapse, you will be notified of that. And at the end of 5 minutes, you must stop speaking immediately, and your time starts once you commence. Thank you.
Good evening, esteemed members of the council and fellow residents. I stand before you today as representative for Mr. Thomas Smith. I firstly wish to make the point, similar to our main objectors, that we were given less than 1 working day's notice to prepare for this in-person hearing, as I was of the understanding that the hearing will be held in private following our appeal to the planning inspectorate. This is a thoroughly unfair amount of time to prepare a response. As many of you are aware from the evidence presented, the garage in question has been completed in line with the submitted plans, which were previously approved on 2 separate occasions with unanimous agreement. It is beyond doubt in harmony with the existing property and surrounding area, contributing positively to the local aesthetic while adhering to high standards of construction. However, testimony presented in the last planning meeting meant that the decision needed to be deferred. It has since transpired that the claims made in the last planning meeting have all been dismissed, however, serve their intended purpose to delay the approval of this garage. You can read these dismissals on page 22. Now we know the claims have been dismissed, let's look at the facts of this planning application. The garage has been constructed with a high degree of craftsmanship. The garage is undoubtedly in keeping with the area where the building materials match those used on the estate. The garage has been constructed exactly to the plans presented to you today, despite objectors continuously claiming otherwise. The garage does not block any view, and the previous wall blocked any possible view, leaving no view to grieve. I do have a Google Maps image, but I will not be sharing it with you because that would be improper. But if you wanted to look on Google Maps, the previous wall was there, and therefore you can see that there was no view to lose. Can you please refrain from...
I've got a copy, sorry, that's why I'm making a copy.
All of these matters are not a matter of opinion, they're a matter of fact. They are entirely verifiable facts, and they are facts that are backed up by the planning officers at Lichfield District Council. Each time these plans have been through this process, the recommendation of the planning officers has remained the same, and I quote, "Having had regard to all relevant local and national policies and guidance, it is concluded that the development in its retrospective form is acceptable at this location. Furthermore, it is considered that the development would not cause significant harm to the character or appearance of the area, the amenity of neighbouring properties or biodiversity. Consequently, it is recommended that the application be approved subject to the conditions included in this report." Regarding the conditions attached to this recommendation, specifically the condition of external lights, we are happy to accept this condition and will consult with the council regarding the specific use of these lights. Until this time, we will refrain from using the external lights. I wish to clarify why the construction of the garage proceeded. Personal circumstances necessitated a swift progression of work. During the renovations at Bowden Close, Mr. Smith and his family resided in rented accommodation, initially on a 6-month lease. The contract was extended twice due to the necessity of revisiting committee hearings. As of March, the temporary residence was no longer available, leading them to move into the house at Bowden Close. To make the property habitable and indeed safe, the driveway, which was but rubble and dirt, needed to be completed. The garage brickwork was integral to this process. Further, as evidenced by the photographs, to erect a wall and affix necessary security gates, the garage needed to be in place. With a young child and security concerns at play, this became a priority. The decision to escalate this matter to the planning inspectorate was made with serious thought. However, continuous false claims, delaying tactics on behalf of the objectors, it had become clear that this was a necessary step. These claims designed to obfuscate and imply due process failures are a direct affront to you, esteemed council committee members, and diligent constituents of Lichfield District Council. We also want it on record that we have lodged a formal complaint against Councillor Salter's conduct. Despite our request to Councillor Marshall on Friday to restrain him from today's proceedings, he stands here unrestrained. I urge Councillor Marshall to share the details of our complaint with the committee in open session, since we heard no referral to that complaint at the start of this hearing.
20 seconds.
I have it printed and I'm happy to read it to you all myself. The past 8 months since the initial application for planning permission was submitted have been taxing both financially and emotionally for Mr. Smith and his family. The matter in question, after all, revolves around a single-storey garage which is remarkably similar to the one right next door. Thank you for your understanding and for your time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Spooner. The reference to the request, I have to confess, I haven't seen. I do apologise.
You were copied directly into the email.
Okay, well, I'm awfully sorry. I haven't seen it. And to be perfectly honest with you, this whole application, the whole process for the last 8 months has been so controversial that I've tried not to enter into any correspondence with anybody at all about it, because I realise that the phrase was used earlier that I'm damned if I do and damned if I don't. And I have chosen to take myself away from as much direct contact with both objectors and applicants as possible, because all that would happen is I would be drawn into a very, very febrile situation. I have seen how exercised both sides are throughout this whole process. And as chairman of the planning committee, I'm trying to remain as neutral, as impartial, and as disinterested as possible. So the very fact that I didn't enter into a discussion or a response, I apologise, but I had taken the view that throughout this process, I am likely to possibly implicate myself in a situation which I think would be regrettable. So, as I say, I've tried to remain totally disinterested throughout, and whether that is a reasonable defence is for others to decide. But I think everybody around this committee room tonight realises how febrile this has become. And actually, in all the time that I've been in planning, I've rarely seen anything as controversial and as heated as this. It's quite ironic, I suppose, that we have seen applications here for 500 houses, which have been obviously debated by both sides, objectors and those in support. Never, ever, I don't think I've seen anyone where there has been so much controversy and so much bad feeling, actually, if I'm being perfectly frank. A lot of bad feeling about this, and I think that's very, very unfortunate. And I chose not to get involved in it, so that is the situation, I'm afraid.
Well, I do have the complaint here, so I think it is valid for the committee to hear.
No, I'm not going to. No, I'm not going to.
Sorry, if I may interject, this is a planning hearing.
Absolutely.
It's not about complaints, whether it be from one party or the other party. This is a planning application as to whether or not something complies with certain legislation or otherwise.
Thank you. And also, of course, we're here tonight to simply make a decision which will go forward to the planning inspectorate. The planning inspector will be able to view this planning committee meeting. He will be able to make up his own mind. A lot of evidence will be submitted, and both objectors and applicants, or appellants as they are now, will have an opportunity to supply any information they feel is relevant to the planning inspector. Members, if you go on to, let me just get back onto where I was. Okay, the report that you have in front of you, you'll see that there is a recommendation. Does anybody wish to speak on this, by the way? Because I'm sure people must have views on this. No? Yeah. Yes, indeed. Sorry. Let me just, okay, there's quite a few of you. First of all, I'll take Councillor Anketel, and then who's next, please? Councillor Hoggins. Yeah, thank you. Harvey Coggins. And Hughes, thank you. Oh, my goodness. Okay, and Galvin, Councillor Evans. Anybody else wishing to speak on this one? Councillor. Okay, right. Nobody here, no, okay.
I might do, but not yet.
Okay, Councillor Anketel, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. I can't help feeling that a lot of the objections are vexatious, and they wouldn't perhaps have occurred if the applicant had been of a similar social class as the objectors who live in that area.
Okay, Councillor Anketel, I'm going to stop you there because that is something probably which is inappropriate, but thank you. Could I now go on to Councillor Harvey Coggins, please?
Thank you, Chair. I've just got two statements and a question. The first is that due to the nature of democracy in the UK, yes, this is a new committee mostly, but I don't think that that's a relevant matter here, and I don't think that that should have been brought up. The second one is that, again, in the report, in our emails, as we had in the original report, is mentioned the guttural noises and the use of the garage. Again, these two matters are nothing to do with planning committee and are not relevant, and therefore should not have been brought to us. And then the third question I've just got is just for transparency. Transparency is what we are seeing on the screen actually what is built. That is just because some people may have seen another picture, I didn't see it, but the dimensions that we are seeing on the screen, is that actually what is physically built? And that's it, Chair, from me.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm just going to pass it over to the planning officer. Straightforward question. What we're seeing there, is that what has been built, please?
I believe it is what's built. If you look at the photographs there, I believe the photographs that have been were attempted to be distributed tonight were showing how the garages are not in line. So if you look at that photograph, it looks like they may sit in line. I don't think they do. The actual neighbour, the application, sorry, I keep forgetting I can point. This garage does sit further forward, which is reflected on the application plans.
Thank you. Can I just ask a question as well? It was stated quite unequivocally by Dr. James Spooner, speaking on behalf of the applicant. He said, I've quoted, in line with submitted plans. That, of course, is something which is being debated quite hotly. Can I have an assurance that what we have built is in line with the submitted plans, please?
As far as I'm aware, yes, it is.
Okay.
And that's what we will set out.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Hughes, please.
We've got pictures.
Yes, I mean, I wanted to echo Councillor Harvey Goggins' first point. I was at the last planning meeting. I've had training, I'm new, but I do actually resent the notion that we're somehow not qualified to have an opinion on this matter. Well, you're too subtle for me then. But I also think in the training, one of the things we're told is that a very small proportion of cases come to the committee. So I do have to say that I'm a bit bewildered that a domestic garage came to this committee. And I also have to say that we have to trust our officers. I was actually sorry that we weren't allowed to make a decision last time. And I was also sorry that councillors, I've not been a councillor very long, but I'm quite prepared to be abused because it's sort of part of the democratic notion that when it's criticised. I think it's unfortunate when quite extreme views are stated about our officers, and I wish that in my first meeting, I wish I'd said that last time. Given that we only consider a very small number of cases, given therefore that we're dependent on our officers, my inclination, I must admit, is to hear all the evidence, but to have perhaps a presupposition that the officers are experts and are honest. And in a way, we've heard other times tonight where things are not perfect. It may be that this garage, which is apparently smaller than the neighbouring garage, is not quite in the right place. I have no idea, but it does seem to me that imperfectly, if I was able to make a decision, I would accept the officer's decision.
Councillor Hughes, thank you very much indeed. I think you touched on a lot of very valid points there, and I very much appreciate the tone of what you've said as well. Thank you. Councillor Galvin, please.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'll be brief because what I was going to raise has been already mentioned. It was about my perception was I felt criticised for being a new councillor. So I just wanted to put that on the record. And secondly, it was just I wanted clarification about the plans, whether they matched what's been.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Which has been answered, of course. The point you made, I understand some people may have been slightly offended by that, and I'd like to say in defence of Councillor Salter, I don't think he meant to be offensive. I think it's one of those things which was probably said and probably I don't say misinterpreted for a moment, but it is all about interpretation of it. But I'm sure he didn't mean to be offensive in any way. Councillor Checkland, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think we met the point of conflict we didn't really need to reach. The point, I think that I was at those meetings. It's nothing to do with ability or otherwise, or whose research was. They were very protracted hearings that had long delays involved in them whilst inquiries were made whilst we were sat in committee. And I think that's the only thing that Councillor Salter was on about, that the process was a very slow and delayed process. It was nothing to do with the standard of the people that are currently here, believe me.
Thank you, Councillor Checkland. Right, moving on to Councillor Evans, please, and then Councillor Powell. Then we need to bring this to a conclusion at some point.
Yeah,
Councillor Evans, please.
I'm one of those that have been at every meeting, but it doesn't make any difference to my decision, because I totally agree that everybody has the right to speak and everybody has the ability to work out what they think about this application, whether they've been here for a long time or not at all, for very long. I'm concerned that comments that have been made that residents can apply to build a garage. Nobody has the right to say that a garage is only got to be used for cars. How many people use the garage for cars anyway? Not many. And there were comments in there that I didn't find acceptable at all. And as far as I'm concerned, nothing has changed from the previous decisions that have been made regarding this application. And having read all the reports, I really conclude that we have got no reason to depart from our original recommendations to approve it. And I spent a considerable amount of time, as I dare say everybody else on this committee has, reading all of this and reading everything that has been put forward, including the officers' reasons for the 13 points that Councillor Salter has made and the answers that they have given. And that's why I really can't see, after having made decisions already, that there is anything materially different now.
Councillor Evans, excuse me. Councillor Evans, I think there's almost a tacit desire there to formally propose approval. Is that correct? Is that what you're doing?
Well, you twisted my arm.
Thank you very much. Well, I'm just trying to advance the process, but thank you very much indeed. On that basis, do we have anyone wishing to second that, please? I'm going to go for Councillor Galvin. Thank you very much indeed. Members, this has been a very protracted application, and all we are doing this evening, as has been outlined before, is that we are not in a position now, because this has been gone to the inspectorate. All we are doing is giving the inspector a view as to what this planning committee would have determined had we been the ones who were the determining agency, which, as it stands currently, we are not. Could I please then have a show of hands? Those of you who wish to go along with the officer's recommendation, which is to approve this application. It has been proposed by Councillor Evans and it's been seconded by Councillor Galvin. Can I please have a show of hands, all of those of you who wish to send a decision forward to the inspectorate on that basis, please? That's 9. Any against, please? That's 2 against. And any abstentions? Okay, thank you very much. Members, so that is going to go forward to the planning inspectorate. On the basis that it doesn't eventually get validated by the inspectorate, then we have, it is implicit in this recommendation that if it doesn't go forward to the inspectorate at Bristol, then the planning officers do have the powers, delegated powers, to determine it. That is part of this recommendation. Thank you very much. Members, we are 2 minutes away from having to read out standing orders. So I thank you very much indeed for your attendance here this evening. I'd like to thank all the officers for their input as well. And I know a lot of work goes into these planning committees. Thank you to all of those who've been viewing online, and thank you to the members of the public who've attended here this evening. With that, I propose to close this meeting at 8:58. Sorry.
Do we still need to approve the additional condition for the solar panel? It's only meant to be at the end of the year. Bring up the agreement with this information is all that.
Okay.
Information. Okay.
No, I was going to say, I don't think that's of any importance at this stage. Councillor Shepton, thank you very much indeed. So with 1 minute still to go, I'm going to close this meeting. I thank you all for your attendance and for your deliberations and decision making this evening. Thank you.